The connection went dead. A hiss of static replaced the faint murmur of the cocktail party, the clinking of glasses, the sound of Leora's breathing. In the cramped, stifling air of the Rome safe house, Eitan Cohen didn't move. He kept the oversized headphones pressed to his ears, listening to the silence. On the reel-to-reel tape recorder, the spools continued their silent, steady rotation, recording nothing. The green glow of the monitoring equipment painted his face in sickly light. He checked his watch. 22:17:04. The dead air lasted for 7 seconds. 8, 9. Protocol was clear. A communication loss over 10 seconds during initial contact with a high-value target was an automatic abort trigger. A signal would be sent. A car would be waiting. Leora would be extracted. The operation, code-named Griffin's Claw, would be scrubbed before it truly began. The target, a Syrian Air Force captain named Adnan al-Hamid, would walk away, and Israel's most critical intelligence gap would remain a black hole. 10 seconds. 11. Eitan's finger hovered over the red button on the console, the button that would pull his agent out of the fire. His jaw was a knot of tension. He saw the face of the young pilot he'd sent into Iraq years ago, the one who didn't come back. He saw Leora's face as he'd briefed her. Calm, analytical, accepting the risk as a calculated variable. She had trusted his plan. Now he had to trust her intuition. 12 seconds. The target was paranoid. They knew this. Adnan al-Hamid was watched constantly by his own side. The party, hosted at the villa of a Lebanese arms dealer, was crawling with agents from a dozen different services, all smiling, all drinking, all watching. The device she wore, a micro-transmitter disguised as a Cartier brooch, was the best in the world, but it had its limits. It could be jammed. It could be detected. He had 10 seconds to decide. The protocol was there to save agents, not to complete missions. But this mission, this was different. This wasn't about just information. This was about survival. 13 seconds. Static. 14. Eitan withdrew his hand from the abort switch. He leaned back in his chair, the worn leather creaking in the silence. He was breaking the cardinal rule. He was betting his agent's life on a gut feeling. At 19 seconds, the static crackled. A voice came through the headphones, not Leora's, but the target's. The Arabic was clear, cultured, but laced with suspicion. "You are not like the others here," Captain al-Hamid said. Then, Leora's voice, impossibly calm, smooth as silk. "Perhaps that's because I'm not interested in what they are selling, Captain. I'm interested in things that cannot be bought." The conversation continued. The hook was set. Eitan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The first crisis had passed. The most dangerous phase of Griffin's Claw had just begun. The order had come down from the highest level. From the office of the Mossad director himself, a man known only as the Architect. His real name was Mir Amit, a legend within the clandestine world. His crowning achievement, still spoken of in hushed, reverent tones in the halls of Tel Aviv headquarters, was Operation Diamond. In 1966, he had masterminded the defection of an Iraqi pilot and his MiG-23, the most advanced Soviet fighter of its day. Amit's philosophy was brutal and effective. When the enemy acquires a weapon that shifts the balance of power, you do not simply learn about it. You acquire it. You dismantle it. You own its secrets. His skill was not in spycraft, but in vision. He could see the geopolitical chessboard 3 moves ahead and was willing to sacrifice pawns and sometimes queens to secure a checkmate. Now, a new threat had emerged, one that made the MiG-21 look like a museum piece. The MiG-23, codenamed Flogger by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was a monster. It was the Soviet Union's answer to the American F-4 Phantom, but it was faster, more agile, and equipped with a revolutionary variable sweep wing design. Most terrifying of all, it possessed a Sapphire 23 look-down, shoot-down radar system. This meant it could detect and fire upon Israeli jets flying below it, hidden against the ground clutter of the desert. For the Israeli Air Force, whose entire doctrine was based on low-altitude surprise attacks, this was an existential threat. The chessboard was drenched in gasoline, waiting for a spark. The year was 1981. Tensions between Israel and Syria over Lebanon were at a boiling point. The Syrian Air Force had taken delivery of dozens of brand-new MiG-23 MLDs, the most advanced version. Israeli pilots, flying their Phantoms and Kaffirs, had engaged them twice over the Bekaa Valley. The results were chilling. In the first encounter, an Israeli F-4 was damaged by an R-24 missile fired from a range the Israeli Air Force had calculated was impossible. The pilot barely made it back to Ramat David Air Base. In the second, a two-ship formation of Kaffirs was forced to disengage when their radar warning receivers lit up with a signal they had never seen before. The unique pulse of the Sapphire 23 locking onto them from above. They were targets before they even saw the enemy. The Israeli Air Force was flying blind. This was the genesis of the mission. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in May. An Israeli Teledyne Ryan 147 Firebee reconnaissance drone, a multi-million-dollar asset packed with high-resolution cameras, was flying a routine mission over a Syrian surface-to-air missile site. It was flying high and fast, well within what was considered a safe envelope. But it wasn't a missile that brought it down. It was a MiG-23. The drone's last transmission was a single, garbled frame of video showing the delta-winged shadow of the Flogger sweeping past, followed by silence. The message was unambiguous. Syria owned the skies over Lebanon. Within hours, the Israeli Air Force commander was in the architect's office. The demand was simple and impossible. Get me a MiG-23. I don't care how. The architect reactivated the playbook from Operation Diamond. But the world was a different place. The target wasn't a disgruntled Iraqi flying an older jet. The target was a top-tier pilot in Syria's most elite squadron, flying their most prized possession, guarded by the notoriously brutal and efficient Syrian Air Force Intelligence Directorate, the Shubat al-Mukhabarat al-Askariya. Seducing a pilot was one thing. Stealing the crown jewel of an enemy air force required a new level of operative. It required a team built for this specific, impossible task. The first piece was the handler. The architect chose Eitan Cohen, the field master. Eitan was not a man for grand strategies. He was a master of the dirty, intimate work of running agents. His legend was forged in the years before the 1973 Yom Kippur War, where he ran a network of informants inside the Egyptian Third Army. He didn't just recruit assets, he understood their souls. He knew their fears, their ambitions, their secret shames. His critical skill was improvisation, the ability to salvage a collapsing operation with a single, daring move. He would be the one holding the leash. The final, most critical piece was the agent herself, the bait, the weapon. Her name was Leorigal. In her file, her code name was Nightingale. She was not a classic honey trap agent. She was a psychologist who had become a spy. Her last major success was the exfiltration of an Iranian nuclear physicist from Tehran. an operation where she had posed as a Swedish academic and befriended the scientist's wife. She didn't use seduction. She used empathy as a weapon. She could find the hairline fracture in a person's loyalty and carefully, patiently, wedge it open until their entire world broke apart. Her skill set was perfect for this. She could build a relationship of absolute trust with a man who had been trained his entire life to trust no one. The target profile was built over months of painstaking intelligence work. They needed more than just a pilot. They needed the right pilot. They analyzed dozens of candidates looking for that fracture. They found it in Captain Adnan Al-Hamid. On paper, he was a perfect officer. A decorated pilot with over 2,500 flight hours, hand-picked for the MLD conversion course. He was a war hero, a patriot. But Mossad's human intelligence sources dug deeper. Adnan was a member of the Druze minority. While officially protected, his family in the Golan had faced quiet persecution from the ruling Ba'athist party. His promotion to colonel had been mysteriously stalled twice. His father's farm had been subject to a sudden land redistribution. He was loyal to Syria, but not to the regime. And he had a secret, a deep, abiding love for Western jazz music and literature, passions he had to hide. He was a man living a double life. He was the one. The problem that needed to be solved was no longer just technical. It was psychological. How do you convince a patriot to betray his country, steal its most valuable weapon, and fly it to his sworn enemy? You don't. You convince him he's not betraying his country, he's saving himself. And you make him believe it was his idea all along. The operational plan was a masterpiece of patient, methodical entrapment. It wouldn't begin in Damascus, a city locked down by counterintelligence. It would begin in Rome. Eitan's intelligence network identified a pattern. Twice a year, senior Syrian officers were given leave, often traveling to Europe. It was an unofficial perk, a chance to spend the money they made from black market dealings. Adnan Al-Hamid was no different. His file showed 2 trips to Rome and 1 to Paris in the last 3 years. The cover identity for Leora was meticulous. She became Hélène Dubois, the daughter of a wealthy French industrialist, now working as an independent art consultant. The identity was layered with verifiable details. A registered business in Paris, a portfolio of real art transactions, a history of attending high-end auctions. She wasn't just a pretty face. She was a woman of substance, intellect, and, most importantly, independent wealth. This was critical. She had to be his equal, not a woman to be bought. The first phase was passive. For 3 months, Leora, as Hélène, simply existed in the world Adnan would one day inhabit. She was seen at the right restaurants in Rome, the right art galleries, the right social events. Her photograph appeared once in an Italian society magazine. She was building a legend, a digital and social ghost that would stand up to scrutiny. The intelligence gathering was relentless. Eitan's team in Tel Aviv built a complete psychological profile of Adnan. They knew his favorite composer, Dave Brubeck, his favorite author, Hemingway, the brand of cigarettes he smoked. They learned he had a cousin, a struggling architect living in Paris, whom he trusted implicitly. This cousin became a key piece of the puzzle, a future communication channel if direct contact became compromised. Then came the signal. A source within the Syrian Ministry of Defense confirmed that Captain Al-Hamid was scheduled for a 10-day leave. Destination: Rome. The plan shifted from passive to active. The first contact, the chance meeting, had to be perfect. It couldn't be a direct approach. Adnan was trained to spot that. Eitan's team chose the venue, a lavish party at the villa of a known Lebanese arms dealer. It was the perfect hunting ground. Adnan would be there, but so would his ever-present security minders from the Mukhabarat. Leora's instructions were precise. Do not approach him. Be the most interesting thing in the room, and let him come to you. This led to the tense moments in the Rome safe house. Leora, playing Helene, engaged in a loud, passionate argument with a pompous German art collector about the merits of post-war Italian sculpture. Her voice, her intelligence, her dismissive attitude toward the powerful men around her was the lure. Adnan, bored and resentful of his minders, took the bait. The brief loss of communication was caused by one of his bodyguards using a handheld jammer to sweep the room, a standard precaution. Leora, sensing this, had moved closer to Adnan, placing her body between her broach transmitter and the guard, shielding the signal just enough for it to come back online. It was a micro-decision that saved the mission. The relationship was built brick by brick over the next 6 months across 3 European capitals. It was never a simple romance. Leora became his intellectual partner. They discussed art, philosophy, the disillusionment of their generation. She mirrored his own frustrations with the rigid, corrupt world he inhabited. In Paris, she took him to a smoky, underground jazz club in the Latin Quarter. As he watched the musicians improvise, a look of profound longing on his face, she knew she had him. "They are truly free, aren't they?" he murmured. "Freedom is not a place, Adnan," she replied softly. "It is a decision." The technology underpinning Griffin's Claw was a character in its own right. A suite of tools pushing the boundaries of what was possible, each with its own inherent drama. Communication was the operation's lifeblood and its greatest vulnerability. Eitan's team couldn't rely on coded messages in newspapers or shortwave radio. The Mukhabarat was too sophisticated. The solution was the Ariel 5, a burst transmission device disguised as a Patek Philippe watch. When Leora needed to send a report, she would go to a predetermined location, a specific bench in the Villa Borghese Gardens, a particular table at a cafe on the Champs-Élysées. She would type her message into a micro keyboard hidden in her compact mirror. The message was then compressed and encrypted into a data packet less than 2 kilobytes in size. At a preset time, she would hold the watch aloft, seemingly checking the time. The Ariel 5 would connect to a passing commercial television satellite, piggyback its signal on a legitimate transmission for 0.8 seconds, and bounce the message to a receiving station in the Negev. It was almost untraceable. Its limitation, however, created constant tension. The battery was non-rechargeable and held enough power for only 20 transmissions. Each message had to be vital. Charging points, known as post boxes, were hidden dead drops where she could swap the watch for a fresh one. These post boxes were the most dangerous part of her routine, requiring her to access locations controlled by other Mossad assets. A locker in a train station, the back room of a complicit jeweler, exposing her to a wider network and greater risk. Surveillance was equally complex. To truly understand Adnan, they needed to be in the room with him when he met with his Syrian contacts. The solution was the M7, a camera the size of a cufflink. But the M7 had limitations designed to make it undetectable. It transmitted no signal. It was a pure recording device. It had no audio, as the power drain would be too great. And it stored only 90 seconds of grainy black and white video. The operational plan was audacious. Before Liora ever met Adnan, a separate Mossad team of Sayanim, volunteer Jewish helpers, had been activated in Rome. One was a cleaner at the hotel where senior Syrian officers always stayed. During a routine room cleaning, he replaced the cufflinks on a complimentary hotel bathrobe with 2 M7 units. 2 weeks later, when Adnan checked in, he used that exact bathrobe for a meeting with a military attaché. The cleaner retrieved the robe the next day. The cufflinks were flown by diplomatic pouch to Tel Aviv. There, lip-reading specialists and body language experts spent 48 hours analyzing the silent 90-second film. They learned of Adnan's stalled promotion and, crucially, a new secret directive from Damascus. Any pilot reporting a significant technical malfunction in a MiG-23 during a training flight was to be immediately grounded and subjected to a full security investigation. The old defection tactic of faking an emergency was now a trap. This single piece of intelligence, gleaned from a silent movie, forced Eitan to redesign the entire escape plan. The escape itself hinged on a device known as the homing dove. It was a small, flat transponder, no bigger than a credit card, with an adhesive back. Adnan's instructions would be to place it on the inside of his cockpit canopy just before takeoff. It remained inert, drawing no power, emitting no signal. It could only be activated by a very specific, encrypted, 2-part radar frequency broadcast from an Israeli E-2C Hawkeye airborne warning and control system plane orbiting just inside Israeli airspace. Once activated, it would broadcast a simple, repeating telemetry signal, allowing the Israeli Air Force to track the MiG-23's exact altitude and airspeed, even if it dropped below Syrian radar coverage. The limitation was the E-2C's powerful radar. The MiG-23 was equipped with a state-of-the-art SPO-15 Berioza radar warning receiver. If the Berioza detected the Hawkeye's radar painting it before Adnan was ready to make his move, the surprise would be lost. Alarms would sound in the Syrian air defense network. The flight path, the timing of the activation signal, and Adnan's own nerve had to be synchronized to the second. One miscalculation, and the trap would spring. The operation was proceeding with the precision of a Swiss watch until Colonel Fayyad arrived. He was a shadow from Adnan's past, a rising star in the Shubat al-Mukabarat al-Askariya, known for his paranoia and his brutality. Intelligence chatter picked up his transfer to the Al-Dumair Air Base, where Adnan's squadron was stationed. The official reason was to enhance base security. The real reason, Eitan suspected, was Adnan himself. Someone in Damascus had noticed something. A slight deviation in Adnan's routine, a travel expense that didn't quite add up. Fayyad wasn't just a minder, he was a hunter. Suddenly, the game changed. Adnan's leave was cancelled. He was confined to the base. All direct contact with Liora was severed. The Ariel 5 watch was useless. She couldn't get a message to him. For 3 weeks, the operation was dark. In the Tel Aviv headquarters, the mood was grim. The consensus was to scrub the mission. The risk of Fayyad uncovering the network was too high. Eitan argued against it. He knew Adnan. The pressure from Fayyad, the constant surveillance, wouldn't make him more loyal. It would push him further away. It would make him more desperate. Eitan's team pivoted to their contingency plan, the Parisian cousin. Liora, still playing Hélène, flew to Paris. She approached the cousin, an architect named Sami, not as a spy, but as a concerned friend of Adnan. She spoke of Adnan's unhappiness, his feeling of being trapped. She gave Sami a simple message to pass on. Your friend in Rome is worried. She has found a buyer for the old painting you discussed. The offer is life-changing. The old painting was their code for the MiG. Life-changing was the promise of extraction. It was a desperate gambit. Sami could refuse. He could go to the Syrian embassy. Leora watched him, using every ounce of her psychological training to read his reaction. He was scared, but his love for his cousin was stronger. He agreed to make the call. The message was passed. The operation was back on. But now it had a new, vulnerable link. The second major setback came from Adnan himself. 2 months later, a window of opportunity opened. Adnan was to travel with a delegation to a military conference in East Berlin. Leora arranged to be there, posing as a translator. Eitan's team secured a single 10-minute window where they could meet, unobserved, in a designated stairwell of the conference hotel. It was there that the carefully constructed world fell apart. As Leora began to give him the final instructions for the defection, Adnan stopped her. His face was pale, his hand trembling as he opened his jacket. He was holding a Soviet-made Makarov pistol. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. "The money, the talk of freedom. You're not an art dealer. You are intelligence, aren't you? American, British." The moment was absolute zero. The end of the operation. Leora's training screamed at her to disarm him, to run, to activate her own emergency beacon. But Eitan had chosen her for a reason. He had called her a psychologist who became a spy. In that stairwell, she was no longer Helene. She was Leora Gal, Mossad case officer. She did not lie. She did not panic. She executed the most dangerous and audacious maneuver in the spy's playbook, the truth gambit. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locked on his. "I am not who I say I am. But neither are you, Adnan. You are not just a captain in the Syrian Air Force. You are a man who listens to forbidden music, who reads forbidden books, whose family is being slowly strangled by the very regime you serve. You are a prisoner in a gilded cage." She took a step closer, the gun unwavering in his hand. "I don't represent a country. I represent an opportunity. A group of very wealthy, very powerful individuals who believe in talent. They are willing to pay $1 million American for your unique expertise and for the single piece of equipment you operate. They are also willing to extract your parents and your sister from Syria before you make your move. We can get them to safety in Canada within a month." She never said Israel. She never said Mossad. She reframed the entire transaction. He wasn't a traitor defecting to the enemy. He was a highly skilled professional making a lucrative career move. A deal that also guaranteed his family's safety. She gave him a narrative he could live with, a way to see himself as the one in control, the one using her for his own ends. For a full minute, he stared at her, the gun still raised. Then, slowly, he lowered it. "How?" he asked. The hook was set again, deeper and more permanent than ever. The mission was no longer about seduction or ideology. It was a business deal. The signal was the final line of a poem by Nizar Qabbani, broadcast during a late-night cultural program on Radio Monte Carlo, a station Adnan was known to listen to. The extraction of his family had been confirmed 2 days prior via a coded postcard sent to their village. They were now in a safe house in Cyprus, awaiting the final leg of their journey. The day was October 11th, 1982. Adnan was scheduled for a routine training flight, a high-G combat maneuvering exercise near the border with Jordan. It was the perfect cover. The plan was in its final, irrevocable motion. 7:58 a.m. Adnan Al-Hamid walks towards his MiG-23 MLD, tail number 27. He conducts his pre-flight inspection. On the control tower balcony, he sees the unmistakable figure of Colonel Fayyad, smoking, watching him. This was not in the plan. Fayyad's presence meant scrutiny was at its absolute peak. Adnan's heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained a mask of professional calm. As he climbs the ladder, he accidentally drops a glove. As he bends to retrieve it, shielded from the tower's view by the fuselage, his hand darts up and slaps the thin, adhesive homing dove transponder to the inner surface of the cockpit canopy. 08:15 a.m. Takeoff. Adnan lifts the 18-ton fighter into the clear morning sky, wheels retracting with a solid thud. He forms up on his wingman. His voice is steady as he communicates with the tower. Everything is normal. 08:22 a.m. He reaches the designated training area. He begins the high G maneuvers as planned. Then, he initiates the pre-planned deception. Tower, this is Sabre 1. I have a fluctuating oxygen pressure warning, requesting permission to level off and diagnose. This was the lie they had been forced to create after learning the old engine trouble excuse was a trap. A minor oxygen issue was plausible, less alarming. 08:23 a.m. The tower grants permission. Colonel Fayyad's voice cuts in, sharp and suspicious. Sabre 1, state your exact position and intentions. Adnan responds calmly, reading out his coordinates. Intention is to cycle the system, per procedure. May need to descend to 10,000 feet. 08:24 a.m. This is the moment. Adnan pushes the stick forward, putting the plane into a shallow dive. Then he performs a critical action. He jettisons his external fuel tanks. For a training flight, this is an inexplicable act. It makes the jet lighter, faster, but drastically reduces its range. On the tower, Fayyad understands instantly. He screams into the microphone, Sabre 1, you are ordered to return to base immediately. Turn 27 now. 08:25 a.m. Adnan does not respond. He pushes the throttle levers to their forward stops, engaging the afterburner. A 10-meter-long plume of blue flame erupts from the Tumansky R-29 engine. The MiG-23 accelerates through the sound barrier with a deafening boom. Simultaneously, he sweeps the wings back to their maximum 72-degree angle, configuring the jet for a low-altitude, high-speed dash. He dives, hugging the terrain, dropping below Syrian radar coverage. 08:26 a.m. Alarms blare across the Syrian air defense network. 2 MiG-21s on standby are scrambled from a nearby base. They are fast, but they are 3 minutes behind and have no idea where to look. 08:27 a.m. Adnan crosses the invisible line in the desert that marks the border with Israel. Over the encrypted channel, the commander of the Israeli E-2C Hawkeye, orbiting 100 miles away, gives the order, activate the dove. A focused beam of energy hits the transponder. In Adnan's cockpit, there is no sound, no light. But on the radar screens of the Hawkeye and in the Israeli Air Force command bunker, a tiny, friendly symbol appears, moving at Mach 1.2 across the Golan Heights. 2 Israeli F-15 Eagles, which had been loitering at 30,000 feet, roll over and dive to intercept. 08:28 a.m. The lead F-15 pilot makes visual contact. I have a visual. Flogger, wings swept, clean configuration. He's flying steady. The F-15s take up escort positions on either wing. The lead pilot keys his mic, broadcasting on the Israeli Air Force's command frequency. Control, this is Eagle 1. The Griffin is in the nest. I repeat, the Griffin is in the nest. At 8:35 a.m. The MiG-23, flanked by its former enemies, touches down smoothly on the runway of a classified airbase deep in the Negev desert. Before the jet has even rolled to a stop, the massive steel doors of a hardened underground hangar slide open. Adnan taxis inside. The doors close, sealing the prize away from the prying eyes of orbiting satellites. Operation Griffin's claw is over. The immediate aftermath was a storm of calculated chaos and deliberate silence. Syria, in a state of profound embarrassment, officially announced that a MiG-23 had crashed during a training exercise due to a technical malfunction, and that the pilot, Captain Adnan Al-Hamid, was presumed killed. It was a lie to save face. But behind the scenes, Colonel Fayyad's retribution was swift and brutal. Dozens of officers and enlisted men at Al-Dumair Air Base were arrested. Anyone connected to Adnan, however loosely, was subjected to interrogation by the Mukhabarat. The purge was a quiet, bloody affair that sent a chilling message through the ranks of the Syrian military. Israel, for its part, said nothing. For 10 days, the government issued no comment, refusing to confirm or deny the sensational rumors that were beginning to leak into the international press. In the Negev hangar, the silence was broken by the sounds of tools and analysis. The MiG-23 was not treated as a trophy. It was treated as a puzzle. Israeli Air Force and Israel Aerospace Industries engineers, working in shifts around the clock, systematically dismantled the aircraft. They photographed every wire, every hydraulic line, every circuit board. The Sapphire 23 radar was carefully removed and taken to an electronics lab where its waveforms were analyzed, its blind spots mapped, its jamming vulnerabilities identified. Test pilots, including the legendary Danny Shapira, were briefed on its systems. They flew the jet, pushing it to its limits, learning how it turned, how it climbed, how it bled energy in a dogfight. They discovered a critical flaw. In a tight, high G turn, the variable sweep wing mechanism was slow to respond, creating a brief window of vulnerability. For Adnan Al-Hamid, the war was over. He was extensively debriefed, his knowledge of Syrian tactics and training proving as valuable as the jet itself. He was then quietly paid his $1 million. He and his family were given new identities, new passports, and a new life in a suburb of a major western city, where he faded into anonymity. In Rome, Aitan and Leora closed down the safe house. They scrubbed every trace of their existence, destroying equipment and erasing digital footprints. Leora, the art dealer Hélène Dubois, simply vanished. They were exfiltrated on separate routes, returning to a hero's welcome that no one outside a small circle in Tel Aviv would ever know about. The true legacy of Operation Griffin's Claw was not written in newspaper headlines, but in blood and fire in the skies over Lebanon less than a year later. During the 1982 Lebanon War, the Israeli Air Force launched Operation Mole Cricket 19, a daring plan to destroy the Syrian surface-to-air missile batteries in the Bekaa Valley. Syria responded by scrambling over 100 fighter jets, including their elite MiG-23 squadrons, to intercept the Israeli attack. What followed was one of the most lopsided air battles in modern history. The Israeli F-15 and F-16 pilots were not fighting a mysterious, superior foe. They were fighting a known quantity. They had the flogger's manual memorized. Guided by the E-Tutsi Hawkeyes, they exploited the very weaknesses discovered in that Negev hangar. They knew the exact parameters of the Sapphire 23 radar and how to jam it effectively. They knew to avoid a head-on engagement and instead lure the MiGs into turning dogfights where the jet's sluggish wing sweep response would betray it. The result was a massacre. Over the course of 2 days, the Israeli Air Force shot down over 80 Syrian aircraft, including dozens of MiG-23s, without a single combat loss. The knowledge paid for by Leora's courage and Adnan's betrayal had saved the lives of countless Israeli pilots and decisively shifted the balance of air power in the Middle East. But even that was not the final revelation. The story did not end in the Bekaa Valley. Years later, after the fall of the Soviet Union, classified documents came to light revealing the full strategic impact of Griffin's Claw. The intelligence gleaned from Adnan's MiG-23, specifically the technical specifications of its advanced avionics and radar, was deemed so valuable that it became a bargaining chip of immense power. The architect, in a secret meeting with his counterparts in the Central Intelligence Agency, made a trade. In exchange for complete access to the MiG-23, the United States provided Israel with something it desperately needed: highly specific, real-time satellite intelligence from their new KH-11 Kennen reconnaissance satellites. This intelligence pinpointed the construction progress and security vulnerabilities of a different existential threat: Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor. The data from the Americans was the final piece of the puzzle that enabled the Israeli Air Force to plan and execute Operation Opera, the daring 1981 airstrike that successfully destroyed the Iraqi reactor and set back Saddam Hussein's nuclear ambitions by a decade. The mission to steal a fighter jet was never just about the jet. It was a key used to unlock a door that led to another door. It was a complex, multi-layered strategic gambit, where the defection of one pilot from Syria prevented the rise of a nuclear-armed dictator in Iraq. The echo of Adnan's flight from Al-Dumair resonated far beyond the sky, altering the course of history in a way few would ever understand.